Good morning and welcome to Bob shifting there we go. I hate the layout where I can't move my head without disappearing off the screen. Good morning, and I'm Bob Brown, and welcome to B Cube Sunday morning. We have with us two iconic women in fantasy and science fiction. When I was reading a book called The History of Science Fiction, I found a nice paragraph in there about our Marleen Barr here. Now, Marleen is, iconic in that. Let's see, what does it say? Oh, yeah, your latest one is she did for us, and that was called When Trump Changed. The Feminist Science Fiction Justice League quashes the Orange Outrage Pussy Grabber in 2018. And I tell you that book will still, when I go to the cons, put it on the table, it still sells 2 or 3 copies a convention. Now, along with her, we have Phyllis, Irine Radford, known as Phil to those of us who know and love her. Phil is the author of a timeless classic, The Glass Dragon, and has just been, she was instrumental in the founding of B Cube Press, editing our very first anthology with me, and between her and Deborah Godfrey is the co-editor of every bestseller we've had. So it's a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you. And good morning.
Now, the reason they're here is because both of them are part of helping develop and publish Post ROE Alternatives. That is our book, B Cube's book on choice. And I say choice, not abortion rights, because abortion rights are a sliver of the choice argument. You have to, when you're talking about choice, you have to be able to talk about the choice to marry who you want to love who you want to take birth control, death with dignity if you choose. The whole concept of choice, independent of the religion of others. And kind of out that old biblical verse of to work out your salvation with fear and to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling is so we wrote, edited, and published, and I believe that we can say proudly, a great book on choice. So what made you excited about this book, Phil?
Having grown up in the 70s when we were fighting and protesting for a lot of these same choices, and to have little triumphs only to have them bashed down again. And so I felt like I was returning to my roots of what was going on. I was a freshman in college during the Kent State incident, watching government troops gun down protesters on college campuses. And in those days, we were still fighting to get the voting age down to 18, to get the drinking age down to 18. We were deep into the Vietnam War, and no one seemed to listen when we said, if we're old enough to die for our country, then we should be old enough to vote for what the country does. And we're still it's the same issue. You can't vote because you're gay. You can't vote because you're a woman. You can't vote because you're an immigrant. A lot of it's different, shifting demographic, but it's the same issue. We did not vote on the Supreme Court decision. They gave us rights and then they yanked them away again. And
can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
The Supreme Court gave nobody rights. Those rights existed.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court merely recognized those rights.
Right, which, people had not done for a long, long time. If there's someone they can bash down, they will do it. Okay, your turn.
Well, now, Marleen, go ahead.
Since, Phyllis, you started out with undergraduate school, I'll go join you in the Wayback Machine. And I was an undergraduate in the early 70s when Roe happened. So even at my age, I had choice throughout my entire life, someone my age. And that's the way it is. I'm used to it. And I was an undergraduate with the inception of women's studies. I was in the first women's studies classes. And I was in those women's studies classes, and I remember I became very scared because I said, well, I'm 18 years old, and I have this knowledge, and I have my whole life ahead of me to live in terms of women's studies. And at that time, when I was an undergraduate, there was like this orgasm craze. Like all these magazines said, how do you give women orgasms?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all on magazines, give women orgasms. And I said, oh, good, I'm 18 years old. Men want to give me, I was heterosexual. Men want to give me orgasms. But what if I were 80 and I lived my whole life and I didn't know about having orgasms? It would be over. And that's why I became a science fiction scholar. Because the reality, the literature that was real, it was like Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, women killed themselves. And in science fiction, women could be heroes, women could do anything. And our book, our post-Roe book, has stories in it, and we could write any stories that we want. And it's the same kind of liberation that I found in science fiction that I found as that young undergraduate, afraid that I'd live my whole life without the knowledge that women can be sexually free, that women can express themselves. So yes. Our book shows us alternative stories.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's more about control than it is about people having rights. There are some people who usually end up in politics who feel that they have no control over themselves, so they will control the rest of the world. And that's what a lot of these rights grabbing issues are about, is who has control. They don't want to let people have control of themselves. And so they feel like they have to take over.
I agree with you. It's totally about controlling women's sexuality. It's all about control. Rape is not about sex. Rape is about control. They want to take away women's pleasure in sex.
Mm-hmm. Right, because if we enjoy it, we can go somewhere else if they fail us. That's what it's about, is men's own insecurity. I'm sorry, Bob.
That's okay. I'm remaining silent.
Yeah. But I have to admit that in the early 70s, when Roe happened, I was newly married and trying very hard to get pregnant. It took a while. I was blessed with one child. I wanted another, but we couldn't get pregnant. So Roe didn't mean a lot to me then. But then I started looking, I went to my first high school reunion, and I looked at all of the women who had dropped out of their senior year because they were pregnant. They were not allowed to attend public school because they were pregnant. They had to go to a special school. And one of the girls I grew up with, was in a very abusive home life. And so she got married as soon, this was when age of consent was 16. But because she was married, she had to go to that special school because they might contaminate us poor, innocent little things. And I'm going, hey, wait a minute. This is a biological function. This is a part of life. We need to acknowledge that women get pregnant, whether they're married or not.
That criminalizes women and takes them out of the mainstream of society. And when you were talking, I thought of what the Catholic Church did in Ireland, that they took pregnant girls and put them in these laundry houses where they were imprisoned, and they were doing laundry. And since you talk personally about your young life, I got married when I was 46, so it was too late. I never I never wanted I never wanted to be pregnant. I just didn't. I was the first woman science fiction scholar in the profession, and I was surrounded by all these men who are still the ones who are alive, are still my friends. And I wanted to be like all the men. So I published a novel, Oi Pioneer, which is about my 20 years of husband hunting. And I ran around to academic conferences having sex with male science fiction critics because I wasn't married, and so what? And I was like a free person. And if in those years I had to worry about getting pregnant and not being able to abort the baby, I don't know what I would have done. To be graphic, to lie in the bed when you're with a man and the penis is coming at you, and you say, this could ruin my life. How do you enjoy sex? You can't. So I come back to it's a matter of control.
Yeah. Cheryl Alexander has a comment on the side about the original religion was a goddess woman based. You can never know for sure who the father of a child is. The important part is that you give birth to a live and healthy baby. When you're hunter-gatherers or even in rudimentary agriculture. But I would like to recommend a book. It's ancient now, but it's called When God Was a Woman by Marleen Jones. I still have my copy of it. But it's not that well researched, but it's eye-opening is all I can say.
Well, talking about religion, I agree with the Jewish religion that says that the baby is a person when it's born. This makes perfect, that's what the Jewish religion says. And what the Supreme Court said goes against the tenets of the Jewish religion that says that the baby is a person only when it's born. And the Jewish religion makes sense. It valorizes the health of people. Like on Yom Kippur, if you're going to get sick from fasting, you don't have to. And to me, this is what I believe, that the baby is a person only after it's born. And these conservatives, as we are all aware, they don't care what happens to the baby after it's born.
Right. And there is a story in our anthology. Well, basically, the hit squad is going after a man because he's boiling eggs for an egg salad sandwich, and the baby chicken has a right to be born. And the 5-year-old daughter comes in and says, "Daddy, when's my sandwich going to be ready?" And they shoot her. And he says, "What about the right to life?" He says, "Oh, she's already been born. It doesn't matter." And that's the hypocrisy of this whole issue. It doesn't matter what happens to the child after it's born.
That's right.
It's just the fact that it has to be born.
Right.
And I mean, it's a ridiculous concept that the chicken has a right to be born, so we can't eat eggs. It's hypocrisy.
And this whole thing does not make any sense to me. As far as I'm aware, men love their wives. Do they want to have a dead wife and bring up the child themselves? Do you know if you get born and your mother your mother dies because this is, I have no words but ludicrous. And the last thing that we need in the time of climate change is unwanted people. To grow up unwanted for what? We don't need any more people.
No, we are overpopulated as it is. We're draining resources much faster than they can be restored. Fossil fuels among them. Quite frankly, I'll be very happy when all the oil wells dry up and we have to find alternative fuel sources that are not as polluting.
The Supreme Court is making. I can't imagine being in a health crisis and the doctor saying I had to go to the dermatologist and it hurt. And that was a hangnail. And I really cared that the dermatologist fixed my hangnail. What about if something in my body was going to kill me? The baby becomes analogous to a metastasizing cancer that's going to kill the mother. It doesn't make any sense. I can't get my head around having a medical condition that they won't treat me because of Supreme Court justices who were put there nefariously anyway, that the majority of the country didn't vote for, and I'm going to die because of that. I can't get my head around this.
Right. And it really wasn't until after World War I and the development of antibiotics and other really useful medications that childbirth was very often a death sentence. Think about that.
That's why people became nuns, I suppose.
Right. And that's also another taking control of your life. A woman is, whether she's noble or not, could not get an education, could do nothing but be a slave to the man who was supposed to protect her. And but if you enter a convent, you can rise to be Mother Abbess, you can have control, you can have power, you can have education. And there are numerous stories of how Mother Abbesses, for lack of another term, were actually actively involved in politics and respected because everyone knew they answered only to God, not to any man. But if a woman was being forced to marry someone disgusting or abusive, or whatever, convent looks like a good alternative.
Yes, because you had control over your body there. That sperm were dangerous to women. They're like bullets. They could kill you. And to me, if there was no birth control and there was no abortion, the sperm were to be avoided at all costs. And if I would, I guess they don't take Jews in convents, but I would go there if that was I could see me in the convent. I'm in the convent, but
there's a little movie, a British production. I think it only showed once on A&E, and it's called Miss Austen Regrets, and it's about the later years of Jane Austen. And she says, she has to attend all these different weddings, and so she'll be dead by 30 with 6 kids. Is about all she can say about every bride. She'll be dead by 30.
Well, many people were dead by 30. I'm going back to undergraduate school for some reason, and that was also when birth control pills came out. And I remember going to the student health service, and they handed me like these horse pills that were birth control pills. And they said, here, they were like handing them out like candy, and they were very high dosage in those days. And they said, here, go take this. And I said, okay. And I took it, and I felt very sick. And even at, I was a freshman at 17. Even at 17, I had a sense of myself. And I said, hell no, I'm not taking these things. And I went to the dorm toilet, and I took the birth control pills, and I flushed them down. And I never took, I flushed them in the toilet. I remember this. I just made my own decision. And I never took another I took one dose of birth control pills in my whole life, because women's bodies were not respected. And okay, go experiment on them. We don't know what these pills are going to do, but go hand them out to all the freshmen. And for my whole life, of being like age 17 to 46, when I got married, there was birth control and there was abortion. And I wasn't taking those pills for anything, and I never did. And I cannot imagine how I would have had my life if there wasn't birth control and abortion, because I knew, okay, if I get pregnant, I could do something, and I could do something to prevent the pregnancy, and I can have control.
Right.
And to take that away, I can't imagine it.
Yeah. There's a story in, I think it's the Protest Diaries, which is another B-Cube anthology. And it's a women protesting Roe v. Wade, and all of their, with their protest signs, they're also holding up condom-wrapped bananas as a symbol of this is the third alternative. And birth control for men has never, ever been seriously produced. Every once in a while, you hear about a news story. Some researcher has come up with male birth control, and then it's hushed. It's quiet. He loses all of his funding, whatever, and it's never been considered a viable option. And birth control for men.
And from the woman's point of view, you can't trust that the man is taking the birth control. At least you know that you're using your own birth control to protect yourself.
Right. And there's other options than just the pill. I'm thinking the diaphragm, which was good enough for my mom. And there are IUDs. There's the 5-year implant. There are other options than just the pill, which, as far as I'm concerned, is not truly a viable option. It damages the body almost as much,
That's why I figured that out when I was 17. I didn't want to take it. And I don't understand now why the young women aren't out in the streets screaming their heads off, and how people could think that the economy is the number one issue. If you're married and your wife dies in childbirth, this is very expensive. You have to pay for someone to take care of the baby for years and years. What kind of financial security can you have if you lose your spouse? And excuse me for being facetious, but these days women work. So if the woman is incapacitated and the woman dies, you lose that woman's financial input in the family, and you have to pay for a caretaker to take care of that baby.
Mm-hmm.
So how is the economy the issue, and how is women's right to choose not the number one issue? This is the number one issue. This is the worst thing that could be done.
Right. And it goes back to climate change and economic issues. There's so much that hinges on a woman's right to control her own body. Yes, I know women who are involved in religions that insist that having more and more babies is the answer to everything. I left mainstream religion for so much because I couldn't have any more children. So therefore, I was automatically a crone and not important. That a woman is only as important as the babies she produces. That's not true.
I never had children, and I think my life has value. And also, I remember, like, once I was walking down the street with my friend's little baby, and everybody paid all this attention to me. Oh, what a cute baby, what a cute baby. Nobody paid such attention to me for the books that I wrote. I never got great feet, but the minute I walked down the street with a baby and they thought it was my baby, people said, oh, how wonderful, what a cute baby. Well, walk down the street with my book and say, oh, very cute book here. I never got that.
Yeah. My son is still laughs that I went to my very first science fiction convention the week before my first book came out. And my editor very kindly FedExed me a few copies of my very first book. And I was walking around the house cradling this bundle of books like a baby. But in many ways, because I had birthed those books from my mind rather than from my uterus, they were my babies.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that my books are my babies, and when I'm dead, the books are going to be here and I won't be, and that's what I left behind in the world. But the world did not valorize me for that.
Right.
And I never got such positive feedback as when I was walking down the street with that child. But I think it's a little bit better, because yesterday I had a big experience, which was I have a lifelong friend that I know. She was born 6 months after me, and we went through every grade together from kindergarten to college. And yesterday, for the first time, I met her little 15-month-old granddaughter. And this is like the closest thing I'll ever have to a grandchild. And when I went into her daughter's house and I saw the granddaughter, her daughter said, this is, her name is, well, I will say her name, but the little baby had a truck. The little girl baby had a truck. I was never given a truck. And I remember that I had this giant doll carriage, and I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment in Forest Hills, Queens, and I could see Trump House from my house. But the doll carriage that I had took up the entire apartment, and girl children were given dolls and baby carriages. And I remember walking around Forest Hills, Queens with this giant baby carriage. And the purpose of that was that girl children could learn how to be mothers. And no one gave me a truck. And I was so excited to see this little 15-month-old girl running around the floor with her little truck. And nowhere in that apartment did I see any dolls or this feminine paraphernalia. There was none. And she took, and what she did was she went to the shelf and she took a book out. She's 15 months old, and she gave the book to her mother. And in her little babble, she said, some version of read this. So we were looking at the book and saying the parts of the body in Yiddish, like pupik and cup, and she knows this. But the little girl had a truck and a book, and this is the antithesis of the giant doll carriage that I had growing up. So here's hope. So no one is training her to go be a mother.
Yeah. My next oldest brother is 3 years older than I am, and he got the cap gun and the cowboy hat and the chaps, child size, and outgrew them. He took up slide rules. But anyway, I thought, I get hand-me-downs from my sister. Why don't I get hand-me-downs from my brother? Nope. They were taken away from me. They were put in the garage and the garbage and the Goodwill. That they disappeared from my life rather than allowing me to explore the possibilities of what I truly wanted. You can't know if you are right for something until you try it and discard it. Just like I tell beginning writers, you can't know you failed until you quit.
Right. And you need to have role models in front of you. And if women are relegated to having children and they can't have sexual pleasure, again, I just come back to the unimaginable. And does a man want to be in bed with a woman who's scared that the sperm would impregnate her and she can't relax, and this hurts men too. Men want to give sexual pleasure to women, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to be in bed with someone who is scared out of their minds? And I grew up in SUNY Buffalo literature and psychology, transactive criticism, where you say personal things. So here it comes. If I were a young woman now, I would not get in bed with a man if it would kill me and make me pregnant and put me through all of this service. It's not worth it. I wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It wouldn't. Not worth it.
Robin Moore on the side, it says, my gun nut father was still girls don't need to learn how to shoot. I did. After I was married, my husband and I took up target shooting. This was in the, I would say, mid 80s, when there was still a lot of, or a resurgence of the apocalypse is coming. And I wanted to be able to shoot a squirrel for dinner if I needed to. So we did target shooting. I got quite good at target shooting. I don't know if I could shoot a squirrel, but it was reaffirming to know I could do this if I had to.
Phyllis, this is making me laugh, because even though I grew up in Forest Hills, Queens, and I'm a born and bred New York City person, I am proud. I could shoot a rifle. I could shoot a bow and arrow. I could ride a horse, because I went to summer camp, which had nothing to do with, and I can fish, because my father went fishing in Long Island. So I'm very proud of this, and it had nothing to do with having babies. And summer camp was not sexist. I have, looking back on it, it was very empowering. I'm proud that I could shoot a gun, do a bow and arrow, and ride a horse, and I still have strength. And if there's a civil war and I have to go fight for women's reproductive freedom, go count me in. I would. Yeah. I would join. I would enlist.
Yeah. I couldn't pass the physical at this point because of mobility problems. But I can sit on my front porch in a rocker with a gun or a bow and arrow.
This is alternative anyway. I was like, okay, we're not really
yeah. So you're looking at this whole issue anthropologically. I have recently read a study that it's possible that humans learn to walk upright so the men could provide better, they can carry more in their arms than they can with, like, in their mouth. And so to bring food back to the campsite, to the woman, to take care of her, because pregnancy does get in the way of a lot of things. And he wants to control the passing down of his DNA. So he learns to walk upright so he can take care of his woman. And so it was the woman's choice that actually allowed humans to learn to walk upright. It was in service of women. So think about that.
Pregnancy is only 9 months, and not for all of those 9 months are you incapacitated. So if you're pregnant in the beginning, you could go gather your own food and get your own water and kill your own animals.
Right. In the beginning, but there comes a time from about 7 months on when your reaction times are slowed, you're awkward. You lose speed, you lose grace.
It's only 2 months though, so you can't plan a whole species on that.
And then for 2 years afterwards, you've got this lump either in your arms or in a pack on your back, which also, and you have to stop every 2 hours to feed it. So it's not debilitating to be pregnant and have a small child. It's awkward.
Well, men can change diapers.
Right. They can. And my husband did. He grumbled and growled and fussed about it, but he did.
Like, where is it? See, to say that it's the women's job to change the diapers, and that is a constructed fiction. It is reality still that you need to have a uterus to have a baby. Okay. But the idea of motherhood and is a constructed fiction when you say that it is that the woman has to have two jobs, to go out to work every day and then come and do all the housework and the childcare. It is not reality that women have to do the childcare once the baby is born.
Right.
Men can take care of babies.
I'm trying to read the sidebar.
Oh,
yeah, more anthropological studies. But anyway, my son still has a very, very good job in the computer industry. And when his first child came along, his wife would meet him at the door. Good evening. This is for dinner. Please be ready in 20 minutes. And she'd hand him the baby. From the minute he walked in the door, that child was his. She'd had enough.
Good.
Yeah. So he's been very active in the raising and development of both boys. And it's heartwarming because my dad didn't do that. One of my brother-in-laws does, but it's a shift in the dynamic that is positive. Roe v. Wade pulls everything, or the denial of Roe v. Wade is a reversal, an evolution.
That's what I said. It makes a problem where a problem didn't exist, and it hurts women who are economically disadvantaged the most because they can't take off work. They have to go to another state to get an abortion and disrupt their whole life. It just causes unnecessary, I'll say, horror to people's lives.
Right. It does.
Why? We're supposed to embellish people's rights and make life better, not take away rights and make life worse. And this makes life worse. And we have the power to do something about it because Biden announced 2 days ago that if there are enough Democrats in Congress, he will codify Roe v. Wade. So I have a big imagination, but I do not understand how anybody could vote for these Republicans who want to take away women's right to choose. And this is another subject. They also, this is not on the book, but it's on my mind. They want to take away Social Security and Medicare. And they're saying that if they don't get their way, they're not going to raise the debt ceiling and crash the whole economy. Who could, and this, so I'll tangentially go back to Roe v. Wade. Who can vote for these people? I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Someone explain to me, how do you vote for people who are killing women because women will die and killing senior citizens who cannot live without Social Security and Medicare? How do you vote for these people? And like, if you're 30 years old, excuse me, you have parents who are going to be impoverished, and what are you going to do? Let them starve in the house?
Right.
If you're a 30-year-old man, what are you going to do? You're going to have a dead wife, you're going to have a kid that you have to take care of, and you're going to have starving parents. This is good? How do you vote for that?
One of the favorite themes in the stories that were submitted for post-Roe alternatives was the Border Patrol stopping women who might be pregnant from going to another state because they might get an abortion. And some of them took it to an extreme, but that's the purpose of science fiction and fantasy, is to show you the extremes so that you will stop and think.
It gives you cognitive estrangement from reality. And if
Right.
you have a book like our book, which is full of stories, you can see that what the Supreme Court did is author a story, and they had the illocutionary force or the power to reify their story into reality. But they are authors of a story, and they have the power to make their story reality. And our book shows that there are alternative stories, and we could have another story. We can vote for Democrats and codify Roe v. Wade, and then we'll have the story that we had back. And there are good stories and there are bad stories. And the Supreme Court have given us a very bad story because they have the power to do it. And now women have become characters in this very bad. They have given us a story that is also an alternative story, which is an alternative to the 49 years of Roe that we had, which was a very good story. And no one has the business to tell you that you can't choose the story of your own body. And what's happening now is that the Supreme Court is making us women protagonists in their story.
Okay.
And I don't want to be in that story.
Okay. There's another story in the anthology that takes things one step further, where there is a Congress, Senate, one of the other, is debating a bill that would remove the right to medical privacy from women, because this way, if they have no privacy, then the doctor can report a pregnancy so that she can be confined or whatever to prevent her from having an abortion. That's taking it to an extreme, but think about it.
That's a fascist government where you can't talk and you can't do anything because your neighbors are going to report on you. That's fascism.
Right.
That's absolute fascism.
Right. But don't dare call it that. No,
Well,
the Republicans are not fascists. Just ask them. Don't look at their actions. Just ask them.
Well,
they will deny it up one side and down the other.
That's according to their story, and I'm an editor, and I'm editing their story, and I want my story of the previous reality back. And I'm hoping against hope that Democrats get elected and Biden can codify Roe. And I don't know what's going to happen when we wake up on November 9th and we see that didn't happen. I can't go through this anymore. I can't even go there. And again, this is off the topic of Roe, but Trump said if he runs again, he's going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene be his running mate. So then he'll die from old age and cholesterol, and she'll be the president. I've been my whole life a science fiction scholar. I can't imagine this. Like, let me out. I want to go home.
Yeah.
I'm homesick. I want to go back.
Yeah. Okay. There's a commentary going on the sidebar on the comments.
It's hard for me to concentrate and read the comments. So I'm going to.
I'm skimming them, but one of the threads I'm seeing replies to is that a lot of women who had illegal abortions back in the bad old days died. Internal bleeding, any number of things. Take chemicals that poison your whole system, bent coat hanger. What happens to the families of those women? The sons, husbands and sons, they lose mom because she could not afford to have another child.
That's exactly what I was saying. That's exactly what I said previously, that if you have a dead mom, the man has to bring up the child for 18 years, and they have to hire somebody to do this, and the child has the trauma of this.
Yeah. And
it's Bob's statistic time.
Okay, Bob's statistics.
Okay, since they started legalizing abortion in the 60s in some states and then carried it through to the Roe v. Wade, 89% reduction in deaths due to from septic on abortions from
Mhm.
septic infection. So you're talking that says under Roe v. Wade, we had an 89% reduction in infection caused deaths in women. Under our new program brought to you by the fascist theologians, wreck our country, destroy our democracy, and strip the rights from any but their own, we can stand to say that there will be perhaps not a 90% increase in the death of women, but there will be significant impacts. Thank you
Yes.
for your time. This is Bob signing out.
Okay. Yeah. And a similar statistic is about schools that allow sex education have like an 80% decrease in unwanted teenage pregnancies. Because sex education is more than just tab A and slot B. They figured that out on their own. But sex education is about the consequences and the fact that a woman, has the right to say no.
Well,
The myth that no means yes is male in control of the situation, not reality.
and if you want to have power over people, you take away their education.
Mm-hmm.
It was illegal to teach enslaved Black people how to read and write. It was illegal. It was against the law. So if you take away sex education, you're also taking away people's right to choose, because knowledge is power, and you're taking away the knowledge and the power. So it's disempowering women to take away sex education. Further taking away sex education.
Yes. And let's face it, as soon as a boy or a girl hits puberty, the hormones kick in and they replace the brain for I don't know how many years, but long enough that now that our society has evolved beyond hunter-gatherer stage, which when you have a high infant mortality rate, then you encourage pregnancies. That no longer applies. We want our girls and our boys to mature at least into their 20s before they start having children. But our bodies have not evolved to that point. And so our hormones do our thinking for us from about, let's say, 12 to 21. By the time they hit 22, their brains are developing enough to say, I don't need to listen to that part of my body every minute of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to know that sex involves respect. And if you have this porn industry, and people think that having sex is analogous to what they see in porn, this is another story that becomes reified and disrespects women.
Right.
And I just feel like I'm in a bad dream. I can't believe this whole thing. I can't. That you wake up one day and Roe is taken away, and you're thrown back into this horror.
Mm-hmm.
And and to remember the coat hanger days, you have to be older than me. So
we're about the same age. I remember the coat hanger days. I remember there was a girl in my high school who died from a coat hanger.
I don't know. When I went to college, I wasn't aware that there was such a thing as Roe. I just knew that I could get birth control and that there was abortion, but I didn't even know that there wasn't Roe before. Like a few, I wasn't even aware that there was a thing called Roe.
Right. It came about when I was almost finished with my undergraduate work. And at that point in my life, I said, okay, yeah, that's important. But I got married very young. And then not being able to have children became an issue. I was very lucky to get the one I wanted, the one child. I wanted another one, but it didn't happen. That is an issue too. But the fact that I was able to use birth control for a couple of years after my son was born, so that I didn't have one kid on top of another, on top of another, on
Right.
top of another.
Right.
That was also very important to me.
Right. I think that I was very extreme in my life, that I wanted to be an English professor. That's all I cared about, was being an English professor. Again, I was the first woman to do science fiction, and I was enmeshed and friends with all these male science fiction scholars, and I just wanted to be like them. And I knew that marriage and children would be an impediment, because when you graduated from graduate school, you had to be free to go anywhere in the country that would employ you. And I knew there was nobody coming with me. And I knew that what man then was going to pick up his job and move with me to Dogpatch, USA, where I got my first job. Nobody was coming to Dogpatch with me. I had to go to Dogpatch alone.
Right. Right.
And I just saw that it was an impediment. Yeah. And I didn't want marriage, and I certainly didn't want children. And I just wanted to do this thing called being an English professor, which being married would have stopped me from doing. And the women who came after me, they're married and they have children, but that wasn't available to me. And also, you had to do something called getting tenure, which means you can't do anything but write for 5 years, and that's your childbearing age. And when I was a young scholar, the women had to be better, and I had to write more than those men to get tenure, which I got by the skin of my teeth, because they told me science fiction was crap. But that's another story.
That's another story.
That's another story. That's too far from the book. But how the hell was I going to go to a job in Dogpatch, sit in Dogpatch and write to get tenure in Dogpatch, when I was pregnant with 2 kids and a husband, and I had to clean the house? I said, no, I can't do this. And that is why, reader, I got married at 46 when I did it already.
Right. 46 seems like a good age to change careers.
Well, no, I married a fellow professor, and I kept up with my writing.
Yeah.
So
we are approaching the end.
Oh, you're approaching the part where Bob wants to come in and speak a little bit to where we started. Post ROE Alternatives, the book, available now on Amazon at fine computers near you, is a wonderful book, and it's full of wonderful work, including works by Marleen Barr and others. In fact, there's rumors, I cannot neither confirm nor deny, that I have a story in there. But
you won't find it, because he has almost as many pen names as I do.
I'm working on it. But the point I'm bringing up is that we have got to recognize that this Republican war on choice is a complete broad-fronted war. Okay, it's on your choice that you can make as to whether or not to bear that child. But it's also a war on the choice of whether or not to use birth control, to use contraceptives. But one of the more disturbing ones is a war on choice about marrying who you love. It's a war on choice about freedom from religion. You might recall the First Amendment to the Constitution says Congress shall make no law concerning the establishment of a religion. Okay? But to quote the current Doug Mastriano, Pennsylvania Republican, who's running for governor, he has said separation of church and state is a myth. They want to have a Christian nation, a Christian nationalist nation, a white Christian nationalist nation. So every time that you look at the Republican Party overstepping its bounds and trying to steal our rights as Americans, look at it from the perspective of what choice are they taking away today? By insisting, for example, that we allow armed people to enter into a town, cannot say, you know what, we're not going to let armed people come in and go to our football games. Leave your guns at home, just like the old Johnny Cash song.
Mhm.
But no, they're saying that you don't have a choice to establish a zone where you're free from getting shot or fear of getting shot. They are attacking the choices of Americans broadly. They're attacking our choice to be free of religion, to use contraceptive, to love who we're going to love, to vote. Look at all the voter restriction laws. Are
Mhm.
even the most fundamental liberties we have, and that is the liberty to vote for who we would vote for. The Supreme Court has got a case in front of it over legislators, basically the super legislature, that says regardless of how the people vote, only the legislatures can get involved in the presidency, selecting a president, and they can overrule the choice of the people. And key word there is overrule the choice. Um,
It was the last presidential election. Trump openly opposed vote by mail. He claimed it wasn't safe. What it was, well, it wasn't safe for him. It was. We didn't. We in Oregon we have only vote by mail. You can drop off your ballot. You don't have to mail it. But the idea is that we don't have to go to a voting station where we can be intimidated by people inside and outside the voting station. We can make our choice within the safety and security of our own home. Our voting
and
participation more than doubled.
and we can't just
Yeah.
go ahead.
But anyway, so that is another choice that we need to reinforce, is the ability to vote as we want, not as the Trump supporters want us to.
But if we vote and they don't count the validity of the election, if they lose, then voting is nullified. They are nullifying voting, so it doesn't matter. And Bob, when you were talking about the guns, what went through my mind is the children that they are saying have to be born. They don't have the choice to go to school in a safe atmosphere anymore. That the little 6-year-old could get shot in school, and yesterday, my friend's daughter with her 15-month-old baby, I said, well, this child will never know that they're wearing face masks. And the daughter said, yeah. And when she goes to school, she'll probably have to do safety things in case someone's coming to shoot her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But let me go back to what Phil said and touch on what you said, Marleen. Washington State is also vote by mail. And you know what? Republicans get elected, even though we're a Democratic state, deeply blue state. But in local elections, it's all Republicans get elected almost across the county. Now, ask yourself this question. If we shift to where all of these election deniers are basically running on the platform that they will never let a Democrat get elected,
Mm-hmm.
what that will do what you said, Marleen. It will negate our election. Our democracy is at stake during this election cycle, and it is not just abortion rights, but it is an assault on the rights of the people versus the rights of the corporations and the businesses that are there. So I would like to close with an opportunity for each of you to give us a 30-second summation of what your thoughts are on this.
Well, 30 seconds. I think people need to discard complacency and stand up and fight for all of our rights. not just abortion rights, but all of our rights. Marleen.
I'm thinking that at the end of Fiddler on the Roof, when Tevye has to emigrate, the Russian comes and Tevye says, "At this moment, this is still my land. Get off of my land." And I feel as I speak at this moment that we still have a democracy. Biden is still the president, and we still have the right to vote, even if you can't get water in Georgia. So go and vote so that we could codify Roe v. Wade, and read our book so that you could see alternative stories and you could understand that what the Supreme Court did is not written in stone. It's yet another story, and we could codify Roe and get our story back. And our book helps to have cognitive estrangement from the power of the Supreme Court story to have us get our story back. So read it and vote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me remind you, next week is last Sunday, and I'm saying that for you, Barb. We're going to have a special guest on last Sunday. Normally we have David Gerald and Jim Wright come on, and they talk about what's on their mind. You can hear about the latest about the giant super trucks running up and down the road every day in Florida, or Jim's latest photography. But at this point, Jim wrote us an incredible essay on a world, what we should really want. If we're truly in favor of, if we truly want to end abortion, what it would take. And said what it would take is powerful. And he's going to talk a little bit about that. And then there is the Adam Troy Castro, just a phenomenal human being. And he wrote us an incredible story for Post ROE Alternatives. And they're going to join David Gerald next week to talk about all of this. And it's going to be a powerful show. And it's also going to be the last, not the last, but the last show before the majority of votes are cast. And so I want to remind you of one thing, and I'm going to quote Jim right here. They said there's only one way that American is going to survive this election, and that is if voters show the fuck up. Okay? If you think the Republicans or the GOP are kidding about what they want to do, if you think that Clarence Thomas is kidding about turning back the clock on marriage equality, if you think they're kidding about taking away, putting doctors in jail who perform abortions, if you think they're kidding about putting women in jail for getting abortions, then you don't know the Republicans. As Maya Angelou said, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Well, they've shown us who they are. We need to believe them, and we need to show the F up at this coming election. And so I'm going to leave it with that and say, please vote. And I don't care if you're going to vote for who you're going to vote for, because it's when the voter turnout is high, America wins. When the voter turnout is low, America loses. And I believe, going back to Kansas, legislatures will oftentimes try and pass laws that the people don't want. If you left it to the Kansas legislature, abortion would be illegal in Kansas. But when you left it to the people, 58% of them said, leave our rights alone. So that said, thank you, Phil, and thank you, Marleen.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to you, Phil, and I enjoyed